Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, subscribe to our channel. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. I took the job because it paid well and promised silence. That's what I wanted more than anything. Quiet, isolation, no one looking over my shoulder. Just a mop, some bleach, and empty halls echoing under my boots. Blackridge School for the Gifted was hidden in the folds of the Appalachian Mountains, tucked between dense pine forests and a winding gravel road that didn't appear on Google Maps. I thought that was strange, sure, but I'd worked in worse places. Old hospitals, abandoned malls, a defunct nuclear plant once, briefly. This didn't scare me, not at first. I got the job after a 15-minute phone interview. No in-person meeting, no background check. They just said, report to the North Gate by 6 p.m. Bring warm clothes. You'll be working alone. My first night was foggy and cold. I drove up to an iron gate taller than my van, its spiked tips clawing at the low-hanging clouds. A speaker crackled to life when I rolled down my window. "Mr. Vance?" the voice rasped. Yes. The gate swung open on its own. I drove up a winding path surrounded by enormous pines. Then the trees opened and the school came into view. Blackridge was imposing. Gothic architecture, 3 stories tall with slate roofs and arched windows lit dimly from within. It looked like something out of an old horror movie. A woman in a black coat met me at the side door. I never got her name. She handed me a flashlight, a ring of keys, and a worn leather folder. "Read this carefully," she said, then walked away without another word. Inside the folder were laminated pages in a cracked leather binding. On the cover, Janitorial Protocol, Blackridge School. Underneath that, in faded typewriter font, rules are not optional. I flipped to the first page. Rule 1. Begin work after 11 p.m. Never arrive earlier. Rule 2. Do not use the elevator after midnight. Rule 3. If the bell rings after 12 a.m., do not go to the source. I stopped reading. I assumed it was just some kind of hazing, a bizarre way to mess with the new guy. With a shrug, I tossed the rulebook onto a dusty desk and got to work. I vacuumed the front corridor, emptied the overflowing trash bins, and wiped down shelves packed with cobweb trophies and faded black and white class portraits. The whole place smelled like damp cedar and something faintly rotten, like time itself had started to spoil. At 12:03, the bell rang. Not a school bell, a deep, resonant chime, like a cathedral bell ringing across a graveyard. It came from somewhere above me, from the 3rd floor. I'd been told the dorm wings were empty this time of year. Students weren't due back for 2 weeks. Still, I figured maybe some old wiring or a wind gust had set something off. I grabbed my flashlight and headed up the marble stairs. The 3rd floor was cold, much colder than the rest of the building. I saw my breath fog in front of me. My boots echoed down the long hallway, which stretched into darkness at both ends. The lights were flickering overhead. Some bulbs were out completely, and that's when I saw it. Something, standing in front of a classroom door at the far end. It was tall and thin, wearing what looked like a school uniform, but its face was pale, too pale, and it didn't move like a person. It glided. One moment it was facing the door, the next it was staring straight at me. No sound, no words, just that pale face cocked slightly to the side, like it was studying me. My flashlight flickered. When the beam steadied again, the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no sound of retreat. Just that old chime echoing somewhere far behind the walls. I backed away slowly, took the stairs 2 at a time, and didn't stop until I reached the main floor. The rule book was right where I left it. My hand trembled as I opened it again. Rule 4. If you encounter a student after midnight, check for a shadow. If there's none, run. I didn't sleep when I got home. I didn't tell anyone either. Who would believe me? Just a pale-faced figure in an empty hallway. No crime, no blood, no proof. Still, I returned the next night. Something about that place, it felt like it was watching me. And worse, it felt like it was waiting. The next night, I showed up exactly at 11 p.m., just like Rule 1 said. This time, I brought coffee, a pocket knife, and duct tape. Don't ask why. I guess I felt like I needed to carry something real, something solid. Because what I'd seen the night before, that pale-faced thing, it felt anything but real. Like a dream smeared across my eyes. The school was dark when I entered. I mean pitch black. No hallway lights, no exit signs, nothing but the soft hum of unseen generators far below. I switched on my flashlight and walked straight to the janitor's office, locking the door behind me. I pulled out the leather-bound rulebook and turned the pages carefully, like they might tear from age. There were more rules I hadn't seen before. B5. Avoid room 209. If the door is open, shut it without looking inside. Rule 6. If you find the piano playing by itself in the auditorium, do not interrupt. Leave immediately and close the door behind you. Rule 7. Between 2 and 2:15 a.m., you may hear someone calling your name. Do not respond no matter what they say. At the bottom of the page, someone had scrawled in pen, "Don't listen to her, she lies." I stared at that last line for a while. She, not it, not they, she. That meant someone, or something, had a voice here. One that knew names. I didn't want to admit it, but I'd already decided I was going to break the rules. Not because I didn't believe them, but because something about this school, it felt like a puzzle, one I needed to understand. I've always had that problem. I press buttons that say, "Do not push." I open doors just to see what's behind them. And that night, at 12:45, I stood in front of room 209. The hallway was silent, still. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. My flashlight beam shook in my hand. The door was slightly ajar, just enough that I could see the faintest sliver of light from inside. I took a breath and reached for the doorknob. But just before I touched it, I remembered Rule 5. If the door is open, shut it without looking inside. My hand hovered for a second. Curiosity clawed at my chest. Then I shut the door. Instantly, something slammed into it from the other side. The whole hallway shook. The bulb above me burst in a rain of sparks. I stumbled back, nearly dropping my flashlight. A sound came from behind the door. Low, wet, breathing, like something dragging air through broken lungs. I turned and walked, slowly at first, then faster. Then I was running. I didn't stop until I reached the auditorium 2 floors down. Big mistake. The door creaked open by itself and the sound spilled into the hall. Soft, slow piano notes, like a lullaby from another time. I should have run. I should have remembered Rule 6, but I stepped inside. The auditorium was huge. Rows of dusty red seats and a stage bathed in moonlight from the tall, arched windows above. And there, at center stage, a grand piano sat alone. Keys moved. There was no one sitting there, but the keys were moving, soft, deliberate, as if a ghost were practicing a nocturne it hadn't played in 100 years. Then the music stopped, and I heard the stool creak. Something was turning, slowly. The keys stilled. The stool spun to face me. I didn't wait. I slammed the door and ran down the hall, my boots thudding against the tile, heart trying to climb out of my throat. Back in the janitor's office, I locked the door and slid the filing cabinet in front of it. I didn't move for the rest of the shift. At 6 o'clock, sharp, the lights flickered back on. The hallway outside looked normal. No blood, no slammed doors, no ghosts at the piano, but the rulebook had a new page. Not typed, handwritten, still wet with ink. Rule 8. You've seen too much. If she speaks to you tonight, cover your ears. Do not let her finish the sentence. Do not learn your true name. My name was written at the bottom. My full name, in cursive. I never told it to anyone. That night, I came armed with earbuds and duct tape over both. Paranoid? Sure. But I wasn't about to find out what happened if I heard her say my true name, whatever that meant. I also brought salt. Don't laugh. When you see a piano play itself and something slam into a door hard enough to rattle your spine, you start grabbing ideas from horror movies. I poured a line across the janitor's office threshold and circled my chair with another ring. By midnight, the halls had gone bone silent again. I sat with the rulebook on my lap, gloves on, flipping each page carefully. Rules 9 through 11 had appeared since last night. They weren't typed like the others. These were written in the same shaky cursive as the last warning. Rule 9. If you see children in the hallway after 1 o'clock a.m., do not speak to them. They are not enrolled here. Rule 10. If you hear knocking from inside a locker, ignore it. It's trying to get out. It knows your voice. Rule 11. Do not allow the security officer to enter the building. We haven't employed one since 1996. That last rule made my skin crawl, mostly because I'd seen a security guard last week. Gray uniform, old school hat, keys jangling. He hadn't said anything, just watched me from the end of the hallway before turning the corner. But it wasn't even 1 a.m. yet. The rules didn't activate till then. I thought maybe I'd have a moment of peace. That's when the power went out. Not just the lights, the entire building. My flashlight flickered for a second and died too. No backup generators, no distant humming, just dead, oppressive silence. And then the knocking started. It came from the hallway, slow and deliberate. Knock, knock. I pressed my ear to the door and held my breath. Knock, knock. Closer now. Something scraped against the other side of the wood, like nails or claws dragging down the surface. Then it stopped, and I heard it, a whisper, barely audible under the door. Let me in, my name. My real name. Not what I go by, not what anyone here knows, my birth name. I nearly dropped the flashlight. My hand started shaking so badly I had to sit down. I duct taped the earbuds over my ears before the shift started, but the sound still seemed to crawl inside, like it wasn't being spoken out loud at all, just thought into the room. Then the doorknob began to turn. It was slow, curious, like whatever was out there didn't need to break in, it just needed me to let it happen. But I didn't move. I waited, every muscle in my body screaming. Eventually, the doorknob stilled, and the voice returned, quieter this time. You let me in first, don't you remember? The blood in my veins went cold, because I did remember. A childhood memory I'd buried years ago. My brother. Our old house. The closet. Something had whispered to him. Something with a woman's voice, and I hadn't believed him until the night I woke up and saw him standing at the edge of my bed, face blank, eyes wet, saying, "She knows my name now." He disappeared a week later. We never found him. Back in the school, something brushed against the bottom of the door from the hallway. Fingertips, maybe. Or hair. I backed away slowly. I wanted to scream, cry, anything, but I stayed quiet. And finally, after what felt like an hour, the presence faded. At 1:37 a.m., the lights came back on. My flashlight buzzed softly and flickered to life. I checked the hallway. Empty. No footsteps. No lockers open. Just quiet. But when I returned to the janitor's office, The salt ring I'd made around my chair had been smudged. 2 lines crossed it, like fingers had pressed through. And written on the wall in black ink were 3 words: "Don't forget me." I didn't sleep when I got home. I sat in the bathtub, clothes still on, earbuds still in, wondering if I was losing my mind. The next shift, I knew, would be worse. The rule book was only getting longer. I showed up early the next night, too early. Still broad daylight when I pulled into the empty school parking lot. I sat there with the engine running, just staring at the building. You'd never guess how wrong it was inside. From the outside, it looked like any other public school. Beige bricks, faded playground, rows of classroom windows. But inside, something watched you. Something waited. Jenna almost turned the car around, but the image of my brother wouldn't leave my head. That blank look, those wet, empty eyes. Whatever had whispered to him, it was whispering here now, and I had to know why. When I stepped inside, the air was too still. Not hot, not cold, just stagnant, like a tomb. I walked to the janitor's office and found a new piece of paper on the desk, torn from the back of the rule book, like the others, written in the same frantic scrawl. Rule 12, never open the basement door, not for anyone, not even if they scream. That stopped me cold, because the school didn't have a basement, at least none I'd seen. The floor plans only showed 2 levels, the ground floor and the second, but now that I thought about it, there was a door at the end of the east wing hallway. Heavy, steel, padlocked. I'd never had the key, and no one ever talked about it. Until tonight. I made my rounds a little faster than usual. The lights above hallway 3B flickered constantly, more than normal. One locker had its door bent inward like something had punched its way out, and I could swear the drinking fountains were leaking something darker than water. Brown, almost black. But I didn't stop. I just kept my head down. Everything was quiet until 2:14 a.m. That's when the screaming started. It came from the east wing. It sounded like a child. I froze by the vending machines, mop still in my hand. The scream echoed down the hallway again, high, panicked, desperate. "Please, someone help. Let me out." It was coming from the basement door. I sprinted down the corridor, feet slapping the tile. The steel door shook on its hinges as something pounded from the other side. I could hear sobbing now, whimpers, scratching. I knew Rule 12. I knew what it said, but my hand still reached for the bolt on instinct. That's when I noticed something. The voice. It was changing. The tone slipped between fear and rage. From a child's cry to a woman's whisper. Then it repeated, "Help me, let me out. Help me, let me out." Over and over. The cadence was robotic now, as if the voice was mimicking what fear should sound like, but didn't understand it. I backed away, and the pounding stopped. I could hear breathing on the other side of the door. Deep, guttural, not human. Then it spoke in my voice. "Hey man, it's just me. Open up." I ran. I didn't stop until I was locked in the janitor's office again, breathing like I'd just sprinted a marathon. I dumped salt along the doorway and windows and curled up in the supply closet. That's when I noticed the cameras. I'd never paid attention to them before, the old school black and white monitors above the desk. But now I saw something I wish I hadn't. Monitor 3, aimed at the east wing basement door, showed a figure standing inches away from the lens, its head tilted, its arms long and wrong. The body moved like it was underwater, or like each joint bent just slightly too far. It was staring directly at the camera. Then, slowly, it raised one hand and pointed straight at me. The monitor shut off. I don't remember how long I sat there, hugging the mop like a weapon. But by the time the morning bell rang and sunlight spilled through the windows, the thing on monitor 3 was gone. And in the hallway outside the janitor's office, written in thick red chalk across the lockers, was a new message. You opened it once. You'll open it again. But I didn't. I swear to God I didn't. At least, I don't remember doing it. By the time the 5th night came, I wasn't just tired. I was unraveling. Every light in that building flickered now, even the ones that were fine the day before. Shadows didn't fall right anymore. They stretched against the direction of the light. The clocks all ticked at different speeds, and I swear one of them ticked backwards. But worst of all was the way the school noticed me. It felt personal now. I kept my back to the walls. I stopped opening lockers unless I had to, because twice I'd found things that shouldn't be there. A child-sized gas mask, still warm to the touch. A set of teeth, neatly arranged on a napkin. A black and white photograph of me sleeping in the supply closet the night before. Except, I'd never seen a camera. That night, the rulebook was missing from the desk. In its place was a scrap of paper. Final rule: if you make it to Friday, the school will offer you a deal. Say no, or say goodbye to the world you know. That was it. No blood, no underlining, just a calm warning. Like the school knew it didn't need to shout anymore. Should have left. I should have gotten in my car, driven out of town, and never looked back. But something about the whole week, the way it mirrored what happened to my brother, kept me anchored there. I didn't want to run. I wanted answers. Midnight came. The air changed. You ever feel a room notice you, like the walls are listening? That's what it felt like when the intercom came on. It hadn't worked all week, but suddenly it crackled to life, and a voice I recognized came through. "Janitor Myers, please report to the gymnasium." It was Principal Heron's voice, but I knew for a fact she'd been dead for 7 years. Heart attack, dropped right in front of a group of 3rd graders. I'd read about it in the news. Still, I went. The gym was lit by a single spotlight now, centered on the half-court line. The bleachers were empty. The scoreboard was stuck at 666, and in the middle of the court stood a group of figures. Students, teachers, all of them wrong. Their skin was too smooth like mannequins. Their mouths didn't move when they spoke, but I could hear them inside my head. "We offer you permanence, clean forever, stay here, never grow old, never leave." Their eyes glowed with that same pale blue light from the forbidden 3rd floor classroom. "Say yes, and we will show you what your brother saw. Say yes, and never be afraid again." I didn't answer. I just backed away slowly. But the moment I reached the double doors, they slammed shut behind me. The mannequins moved closer. Their faces began to shift, morphing into people I'd known. My old teachers, my mom, my brother. Each one pleading, each one offering peace. But that final rule echoed in my head. Say no, or say goodbye to the world you know. So I did something stupid. I pulled the fire alarm, and the sound that came out of it wasn't a bell. It was a scream. Not one voice, but hundreds, all crying out in rage and pain. The mannequins convulsed. Lights exploded overhead. The walls began to bleed that thick black ooze again. And then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying outside, on the grass. It was morning. The school stood quietly behind me, as if none of it had ever happened, as if the week hadn't chewed my mind and spit out my sanity. But I know what I saw, and I know what it wants. The rulebook never reappeared. The job offer vanished. They erased my employment record. The building has janitors again, but not me. I went to my brother's grave the next week, and there, scratched into the back of his headstone, were the words, "He said yes." And now I wonder if the school will offer my replacement the same deal. If you hear someone scream behind a locked door, don't open it. If a mannequin smiles at you in the gym, run. If a school offers you a job with rules that don't make sense, Say no, because the scariest thing about that place isn't what happens inside. It's that it's still hiring. That wraps up tonight's pasta. If your lights flicker, don't blame the wiring until the next shadow creeps in. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It helps more than you know. And if you liked the story, don't forget to hit the like button. In the comments below, share your own horror experience. I'll be reading after midnight. Good night. See you again tomorrow.